Hi, it's Jessica Lessin here with the information, and I'm sitting in San Francisco with Robin Murdoch of Accenture. Robin is Global Managing Director of Software and Platforms at Accenture, one of the 13 industry groups overseeing all leading platform companies, which we know is a broad purview in today's day and age. Robin, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
So Accenture has some new ride-sharing research that's out. Tell us what you found.
Yeah, so we surveyed a number of ride-sharing users here in the US, and the headline really is that people love ride-sharing services, but the brand commitment is not really there. People are really switching between the different services.
Then, with my business reporter hat on, I see that this is to perhaps explain for some of the challenges Uber and Lyft are still facing here. What did your research show in terms of trajectory, right?
Yeah.
Is it tilting one way versus tilting the other way?
Yeah, I think so. So two key things. Certainly in the near term, people are really satisfied, and that's showing up in the fact that people are planning on maintaining or increasing their spend. So the vast majority of people are planning on maintaining or increasing spend on ride sharing over the next year. But interestingly, as you look to sort of over the next decade, 2/3 of people said that they'd consider giving up their car, and the vast majority of people we spoke to did actually own or lease a car. So certainly from an outlook perspective, people love ride-hailing services, and would consider over the longer term switching from owning a car.
Well, that's fascinating. I remember, you've seen companies like Uber and Lyft and many others say our target market is car ownership, right? It's not the taxi industry or something like that. So you're seeing that consumers are, there's some evidence that may be possible, but not there yet. Is that?
Yeah. No, I think that's fair. I mean, so the people we spoke to, the vast majority of them do still own cars, though it's something that we can probably expect to see over the coming few years. But in the near term, lots more usage of ride-hailing.
What about micromobility and scooters? What did your research dig up on that?
Yeah. So we asked people if they used different adjacent services, and actually people surprisingly said that they weren't using as many adjacent services. They're sticking to the one thing that they're using. So we found about 40% of people were using adjacent services like scooters, etc. So certainly that's an opportunity.
What else is adjacent? So scooters, or what else would fall?
So there's a whole bunch of things. There's package delivery. There's the likes of Uber Eats, food delivery. So people were really focused on the main ride-sharing services themselves.
That's fascinating. Also kind of baked into the business expectations of these companies as sort of the platform take on Amazon, and while we've seen, I think, in food delivery and Uber in particular, a lot of growth, just a brutal market, I think, in terms of the competitive economics, and be interesting to see, if how consumers feel given there is still a lot of competition and a lot of choice.
Yeah, and certainly if you look in the US, those adjacent services are very attached to kind of the original service of ride-hailing. Actually, if you look outside the US, like into Southeast Asia, Grab, for instance, it's getting into the payment space. Or if you look at like a Didi in China, you see that them sort of expanding more vertically into multiple parts of the ride-sharing service. So partnering with electric vehicle companies, charging infrastructure, etc. So around the world there are different approaches to really expand from just core ride-hailing.
Do you think that geographically we'll see more convergence? I think you mentioned autonomous. We have Uber, and that is still investing heavily in that. I'm not sure with what sign of traction yet, but or with your global perspective, you think the markets will keep their distinctiveness? Yeah,
look, everyone is trying. Everyone is looking at these new futuristic services like autonomous vehicles. At CES this year, there was lots of talk about air taxis. There was a mock-up of a Hyundai and Uber air taxi. So certainly leaning into the future, there is this promise of autonomous vehicles, and obviously autonomous vehicles in the air, on land. but that is uncertain as to when that will really kick in. What does get interesting though, when you start to look to that future position, is the economics potentially change dramatically. So you move from a very OPEX intensive ride-hailing service to one where, well, if you've got autonomous vehicles, it's much more CapEx intensive. So you've got that interesting change in sort of financial position that you might see in ride-hailing, but it's uncertain as to when that's actually going to kick in.
Do you think the public, perhaps the press, are over or under optimistic on just the timelines for autonomous?
Yeah. I mean, you hear very different things from different people. There's one interesting school of thought that actually, even though it sounds very Jetsony, air taxis are an easier autonomous solution than traditional autonomous vehicle cars.
There's more air than road space, right?
They're actually
thinking that through.
The problem areas that you need to overcome, they're actually less from an air taxi perspective, even though it's so futuristic. We actually asked consumers if they were interested in an air taxi service, and about 40% of people actually said they would consider it, but they were thinking of it more in the sort of traditional sense. So they were saying, it'd be great to get to the airport by an air taxi service, or get a tour of a city from an air taxi service. So it was more that versus traditionally sort of knocking out your normal ride-hailing service.
Yeah. I always think that Sebastian Thrun, who was basically one of the godfathers of autonomous vehicles at Google, is now put all his eggs in the Kitty Hawk vertical takeoff and landing bucket. So I think, it's easy to forget the air, but we shouldn't.
Yeah. I mean, I think Hyundai and Uber at CES. There was also Toyota announced a $400 million investment in JB Aviation. So you're certainly seeing the vehicle manufacturers looking at this space with real interest.
I always wonder if my kids are going to be getting their driver's license. They're 3, so driver's license, pilot's license, whatever it's going to be in the next generation. Wonderful. Well, Robin, to wrap up, what else did the research show that jumped out at you?
Yeah, I think the flip side to all of this is just brand commitment, that a significant amount of people are switching between the brands. We found over half people are switching between the brands. So how do you really maintain that brand loyalty? And it's addressing all of the issues that consumers have in the whole riding experience. And that also includes trust, maintaining users' trust, maintaining safety. Those are absolutely critical to users. So while there's great potential in ride-hailing, from people giving up their cars to spending more money, brand commitment certainly is something that's remaining elusive.
Do you feel like the market share picture, and it's such a fascinating industry because it's global and complicated, but you think it's pretty entrenched, or does that tell you think there could be room for very wild swings?
Yeah, I mean, it's a market that just continues to evolve in almost every region. And as you look at sort of the promise of autonomous vehicles, etc., it's potential that it will get disrupted again. So it's not stable, but certainly it's the case that in a given region there are one or two major players that are dominant.
Yeah. Well, we've been covering it since its infancy, and it's great to have that context or the research of what we can expect in the years ahead. Thank you so much, Robin, for joining us.
Thanks.